What if you could sit down once a week with a colleague who's a flat-out warrior? This colleague wasn't a stud in dental school. He struggled. He returned to practice in his hometown, an area once labeled by USA Today as the second worst place to live economically in the United States. And this very same colleague went on to establish an historically successful general practice known worldwide. What if you knew someone that wanted to take you by the hand and show you everything you need to know, from treatment planning to leadership, to maximizing your journey in dentistry, or just life? You ready to be inspired? Welcome to the Lionhearted.
Hi everyone, Dr. Steve Rasner back, and you're listening to the Lionhearted Dentist. Listen, this is my second week back from spinal surgery. I actually tried to do it a few weeks before you actually heard me, and I had no voice. This is one of the hardest physical things I've ever gone through. And I'm only saying that to you in case you think my lack of a normal voice is to be confused with my lack of enthusiasm to help you or to do these, and it's not. So listen, I have a action impactful 30 minutes for you this week. I've thought about some things. I want to share them with you. I want to pick up where I left last week. But one thing I want to say to you, two things. The first is about my courses. My extraction course of March 3rd and 4th is sold out. However, those of you interested in implant dentistry, live surgical implant dentistry. Look, I haven't been to the other live courses, certainly in Mexico or Central America or Brazil. I'm sure they're great. And I haven't even been to the others in the United States. But I can promise you that if anybody's ever taken mine and did not love it, I don't know about it. And it requires enormous preparation. And the news I'm about to tell you is I'm moving it. It was to be 1 month after the other course on March 31st and April 1st. We're moving it to the first week of May. I think it's May 5th and 6th, which will give some of you the opportunity if that's what you're interested in. Okay. So you can contact me at drrasner@aol.com. Or you can call Shelby or Charday at 856-692-1370. Okay? Tell them you heard me and you were interested. Okay, and one more thing. And I don't think I've ever asked you this in 4 years. What I will say is I'll say, hey, write to me if you're interested in that. And I look over sometimes before I come on the show with you, a software that allows me to see what countries download this podcast. And so obviously the majority is the United States, but United Kingdom is always right there, and Canada and a lot of European countries. And incredibly flattering is also Netherlands and Hungary and Mexico and India and even in Turks and the Caicos Islands. Wherever you're from, drop me a line. Take 5 minutes. Because honestly, I'm going to be straight up with you. Continuing to do this is something I am thinking about as one of my... Is it a goal for me to expand it, change it? I'm not going to start having guests 4 years into this. It's not why I do this. The people that listen to the Lionhearted Dentist, in my opinion, are very much lion-hearted dentist. You are tough. You are a mental warrior. You probably overcome things in your life. And you really do aspire to having this thing that I relate to all the time called the lion-hearted practice. That is achievable in any one of these countries that tune in here. And the truth is, I do get a lot of emails, and I'm actually doing this podcast right this second on a Friday night at 6:30. Because if I don't do it by now and email it to the guy that puts it together and mails it to you, edits out when I call for whatever, or when my cats crawl across my computer, it won't get out by next week. And I hear from a handful of you, and I want to hear from more. I want to know I'm having more of an impact. It's not that much of a life changer to me whether I do it or not. I started it. I've met a lot of good friends. Lots of you I've gotten to meet at my surgical courses. And not that I have forgotten, and it's going to happen, that I'm going to put together a business meeting either in Philadelphia or New Jersey. So it's either going to be at my dental practice, because there's a hotel right adjacent to my practice. And it's a little, so you have to fly into Philly and drive 50 minutes. But that's where all the course all the course doctors go. So it's going to be one of those two. It's either going to be in the fall of 2023 or the beginning of 2024. And I apologize. Things happen, life happens, and I want to do things at a very top level. So I have to prepare. So write to me. Tell me, like many of you do, so I know that I have a voice out there. Okay? Listen, let's get back into it. Last week was the second podcast, I believe, of 2023. Or maybe the first. And I talked about something that was called goal setting. And a lot of you did respond, and I loved it. Okay? One of you wrote to me, Nick. You wanted my CE recommendations and the morning meeting agenda. By the way, I just sent that to you before I started this podcast. Okay? So this is what I want to say to you about that kind of goal setting. It's taking the time to say, and you must do it. I want you to remember that strategy is a higher priority than spending. I went back and looked at some of my lectures and some of my slides that I used to key on, and that was one of them. Some of us, one of your goals, think about this for a minute, guys, because come on, I'm really trying to put my arm around you and help you get to a place worth getting to. And some of you, your goal will be to buy a printer this year. Or maybe it'll to be purchase a T-shaped scanner. And there's nothing wrong with that. They're good goals. As long as you have thought out what your practice really needs. Do you hear me? And you're not going to know that unless you strategize. And so and I mentioned to you, and I'll say it out there one more time, there are two kinds of meetings that you need to have in a successful, listen, I went 30 consecutive years. Actually, it was 29. I want you to think about it for a minute. 29 consecutive years that my dental practice in southern New Jersey enjoyed an increase in productivity and profitability. So it stopped in 2008 for 2.5 years because there was a great recession in 2008. There was 3 or 4 recessions from 1980 to 2008, and they didn't affect me. I thought I was recession-proof. I did. I thought these cornerstones that I shared with you were so powerful that even a recession couldn't interfere with our success. And it was true, except for 2008. And we dropped $700,000 over, it was a tough time. And you know how I got out of it? And it was a hard decision to make. I got out of it by meeting with my team, not once a month, but twice a month. Because I found that once a month was not an effective time period to actually implement and get stuff moving and done, new stuff that we implemented. A lot of ideas would kind of like not take hold and phase out over the 30 days. And 2 weeks is half that time, and you can see and react quicker and get things in action and motion, which I like, and I know a lot of you like. So we meet every 2 days, 2 weeks, excuse me. It'd be at the beginning of a day. It was a Thursday. We would. And I would meet with my entire team and understand that there was a written agenda that had been compiled since the prior meeting that everybody had, not that morning, but a couple days before. We ran this thing like a corporation. And another thing, we listed the dates of the meetings in the lunch break room. Or I had somebody that, I tell you, I always delegate. Like, I didn't want anybody ever to say, by the way, including myself, that I didn't know there was a meeting this morning. When you have a lot of meetings, that can happen. And it's very, very morale busting and frustrating when you put all this extra energy, because this is a lot of energy. But let me tell you something, when you start to see things change, like maybe you want to put a computer that you don't have right now into your reception room where people can check in online while they're waiting. Maybe they didn't do it at home. Or maybe you want to implement that system online where they can check in, fill out paperwork like so many of us do when we go to hospitals, which I just went through, by the way. I tell you something, I was very impressed on many levels with the protocols used by the major hospitals in Philadelphia. I really was. And I'm always looking to be palpably different in my practice. What could we do to make us better? So like I do a lot of surgery, as many of you know, and I liked how they would instruct the patients with even diagrams. I know it may not sound profound to you, of what to eat, what not to eat, what to stay away from. And I've already begun to enlist that style of patient recommendations for my own practice. So these things would happen every 2 weeks. It's very hard to come back to an office meeting 2 weeks later with no gain, with no changes, because I'm going to read and review the things I asked for at the last meeting. Remember, these meetings are not the time that you want to sound off on you're mad at Susie or somebody. That is not. These meetings have the purpose to improve your efficiency, to reduce overhead, make you a more palpably different practice from everybody else they can go to. And we have a lot of reasons in Lionhearted practices where we're fee for service eventually, and where we should and need to be palpably different. So it is a lot, and I'm not telling you that you have to do it every 2 weeks forever. I didn't do it forever. We did it for about 9 months to a year, and it broke the cycle of down years for me at 2008, 9, and 10, whatever it was. I think it was 3 years. And we were down $700,000, and it turned it around completely, and I've never had an off year since. And why I'm just talking about money, I want to say one other thing to you. I want to say that if you're listening to me right now, and your practice is doing 500 grand, getting you from 500 to $1 million, honestly, I'm just giving you my honest opinion, or certainly 2 million, I would never bet against me that I couldn't do that for anybody out there listening by simply examining what you're presently doing and then telling you what you need to do. However, going from 2 million to 2.5, 2.5 to 3 to whatever, it gets harder as you get higher up. It does. And it's extremely important. Now, I'm doing this 42 years. I've told you that one of the reasons I'm on this podcast is to help you with the mistakes I made. It would be a mistake to just keep pushing for more production and revenue unless you know forensically that your net's improving. Who cares if you make an extra $50,000 between $2 million and $3 million, right? Now, that's probably an exaggeration. I would hope that's an impossibility. But while we're at it, I'm just going to throw out there one thing for those of you that are in that neighborhood of 2 million plus. And that is that when you get to that, you may want to do two things. You may want to get a virtual outside of your office accountant that will look at your numbers independently from the people in your office. I had that for several years of my practice towards the latter years. I don't have it right now, but I did. So this is somebody I would pay virtually, and I can give you her name and number. She's extremely qualified. I got no agenda with it. I don't make a nickel off of it, nor would I make a nickel off anything I would recommend to you. I hope you know that. And, and I would also always check my own numbers, my own bank statements, my own everything, all my money accounts, myself with my own eyes 3 times, 4 times a year if you're not. And I say that to you because I am the guy that never locks his car. Okay? I'm the guy that let people write my checks for as long as I can remember. And I would not consider myself a totally lucky person, but I was lucky in that department of my life. That said, I did get hit earlier in my career to the tune of 6 figures 2 different times by employees. And that was way earlier in my career. Okay, off subject, let's get back into it. So when you hear me talk about goal setting, it's strategizing, okay? And I think that's where you start. I don't think you start by, unless you put all the investigation in front of you first, by recarpeting, buying a piece of expensive equipment, etc., etc. And that really extrapolates to the days you have. Bad days in your office are not an accident. In my opinion, they're created weeks in advance by lack of diligence to protocols to how you prepare for each day, including a morning meeting. Okay, I want to flip ahead to you for a minute and give you some suggestions for goals that you may want to implement, that I would implement if I was you in 2023. Send me a nasty email if I'm being redundant. I'm sorry. This is where I would go. For goodness sake, start the process, and start it now, of getting your oral sedation permit, whether you're an associate in not your own practice, whether you're a recent grad out of a D dental school. It doesn't matter. If you're an associate, you will probably become the most popular rock star in that practice that you're an associate in by doing so. If you're in private practice, it's by far the most powerful practice builder I could ever give you. When you get it, you want me to send you my oral sedation protocol. And of all the things, if you ask me, what were the cornerstones of Steve Rasner's Lionhearted practice? Well, there's probably 10. Having an oral sedation permit and a practice is top 3 or 4. Learning the power of getting paid up front, which allows people to complete their treatments. Honestly, above everything else, that's what it does. having a stellar, because I spent a lot of time and I want you to, a case presentation. Like, what happens when the new patient comes in? So, cornerstones, I said oral sedation permit first. So what you do, and in other countries, you have to call the governing body of the dental profession and say what is needed for moderate sedation. And I've told you before, in the United States even, sometimes a state will have you, the range in the United States is from nothing, that you can just give them, at least that's what I've been told, in a couple of states, not many, to needing an IV sedation permit to dispense oral sedation, which isn't the worst thing in the world, guys. I don't care. I personally am not an advocate of the dentist doing the IV sedation as well. And I know there is a plethora of you that are just amazing at it. I really try. A career is a long time. And I really try to follow a road to minimize things clinically connected to my practice that could set me back. And so I'm safe. I work on ASA 1 and ASA 2 patients generally. If they're, I'm telling you something, we could have a whole podcast on this, but it's worth me bringing it up right now. I know a lot of you listening to me are extremely advanced surgically. In fact, I know some of you have taken my surgical courses and you have ran with those principles and advanced beyond belief to me. And many, many of you are into the arena of all-ons, and when you're in that, that's like a whole different classification of dentistry, because you often have to have IV sedation, and you need equipment and everything else. Listen to me. Fine. If that's what you choose, great. It is easy to burn out in this profession. The Lionhearted practice probably would not be defined as one that specializes in all-ons, teeth in a day, and services like that. I'm a general dentist that has chosen to do, in my particular practice, a smaller scope of procedures at a very high level, from extractions and grafting to perioprost. Any of you out there that have learned from Frank Spear or John Coyes are practicing perioprost. You're not a perioprostodontist, but that's the principles as they teach. As well, of course, as implant dentistry. Just, I wish social media didn't exist, because it tempts many of you and tantalizes you to want to do more and more and more. And you could just have such a more relaxed practice if you took your good old time and dealt with abundant bone cases in the beginnings of your career, whether it's between the foramina, and that's an important thing to talk about, because part of implant dentistry, part of you being a hero, is placing implants between a mental foramen, if there's no bone posteriorly, and certainly in the maxilla, it's much more challenging. And there's nothing that makes you less of a Lionheart by referring certain cases out. I can assure you, the guy speaking to you tonight wishes he had referred more cases out. Okay, so get your oral sedation permit. Really review and perfect your case presentation in 2023. These are just your professional goals, your professional office goals. You must have personal goals as well. And when I say that to you, if you blow that off, it's on you, because it all connects. When you get your oral sedation permit, if you start right now, you won't even get it till the summer. or maybe the fall. In most states, it's 60 hours. But when you start advertising it, send me a Christmas card because you'll want to. When somebody says to you, why? What made you do that? Listen to Rasner's Lionhearted. Give what I told you to do last year. Give yourself more time, which if you do these things for all procedures. Let me back up for a minute. When I told you to review and perfect your case presentations, remember, that starts with your marketing. How are you marketing right now to the people that choose to pick up the phone and call your office to see you? And then who's the person in charge and what is her rap? What is she saying? Random? Anybody can schedule? No really questions that we ask? Because we do, and we have for 30 years. It's called a screen. Because we want to screen out the patients that we don't think are going to be a fit. Because you only have 8 hours a day to do what we do. And if you allow 20% of your new patient evaluations to be patients that had nothing in common with you, they just needed a dental appointment, and that's all they needed to qualify to get into your practice, because you don't have a series of questions that are called a screen that I don't call it manipulative. I call it trying to see if you fit. Will they allow you to take a full set of x-rays? Will they allow you to do a complete exam? Will they allow you to look at their entire mouth? If they're not going to do that after you proactively tell them this is what you can expect at the first visit, then it's not going to be a match in my office. And I have many, many, many podcasts on this subject, as many of you know. Give yourself more time for procedures. I went into the office this week for the first time since my surgery. So I was very, very deliberate about going even lighter than ever. Hey, guess what happened? I want to tell you, I found this discovery. I had extra time to talk to people, be it my staff. Oh my God. It was me, the guy that already told you that I had time to my procedures, found more time. And I went in hygiene and rebonded and connected with people. Even when I wasn't trying, I was getting cases. I heard myself explaining, because I wasn't in a hurry, why I would do what I would do if I was this patient. And 100% of the time in 2023, go into that case presentation or recommendation without the single thought of business. It is what it is. And you're a doctor, and they're coming to you because they trust you. And you can never violate that trust. And they're counting on you. And sometimes you have to tell people hard stories, things they may not want to hear. I had a fella come in this week that had the most severe bruxing habits I have ever seen in 42 years. While he was in the chair, he was bruxing in front of me. So unbelievably advanced that I'm going to refer him out. I don't want to deal with it. Because this guy would have to restore every tooth in his mouth. And I told him all this, by the way. And I couldn't even be sure in any way of the longevity of the rehab construction. And I don't know, maybe it's because I'm 100 years old or feel like it this month because of the spinal surgery. But I don't do that very often. And it felt pretty good. I'm just telling you, if you do diligence to a case presentation and you look at the 5 arenas that I've told you to look at from the beginning, the health of their periodontium, and I was going to go into that tonight, but it's going to make this too long. Exactly what I do. I can't stand it when a hygienist comes to me and says, she had scaling and root planing I don't care what she says, a year ago, 2 years ago. And I told her I planted the seed, another expression I hate, that if she doesn't improve, we're going to have to revisit that. Really? Is that what we do as diagnosticians and clinicians? Is that what we do? We plant seeds when there's disease right in front of us. Is that your fault? I'm not telling you to be mean about it because I know nobody likes that. But it is what it is. That's one of those things that it is what it is. You either have a healthy periodontium or you don't. So I look at the periodontium. I look at every tooth. They didn't come in for me to look at every tooth, but you have to. I look at their missing teeth, how it's connected, their occlusion, a lack of teeth contributing, sometimes not at all. And I'll look at their aesthetics, 5 arenas. And I do diligence to that, and I rarely have time to really do a whole lot of else, whether it's very genres that have added to our dental practice is in the last 10 years, whether it's sleep dentistry or Botox. I have time for none of that. And I'm telling you, some of you are just starting, and I'm really trying to help you. Even when you just do really good dentistry in the arenas I talked about, that's a handful in itself. And I'm just trying to help some of you not get over your head. You don't have to do everything. You don't. Okay, so we're up to 32 minutes. Way too long. I hope you enjoyed this. I'm going to do another one so I don't have to do it next Friday night, tomorrow. And write to me, Dr. Rasner, DrRasner@AOL. Remember, the takeaway from this week is a continuation of why we have to meet, why we have to do things. You don't need to run out and take a course in January. I mean, if you have one scheduled, I'm happy about it, by the way. I didn't get to that part. You know, one thing I was going to tell you, use 2023 to stop doing things you don't want to do. You should think about that. I don't know how some of you that are so advanced do full mouth extractions, place 5 implants, and then your next patient is a buccal, one surface composite on number 30. You need an associate. I know they're hard to find. Nothing's easy in life, guys. So you got to do what you got to do. Leap and a net will appear. If your heart's in the right place and you're earnest in your approach, when you go after something, the net appears. And then take courses in things you like that you're just not good at. Off-label secret. I may take some full mouth denture courses for maxillary dentures with a couple people in the world that I think know really how to do it. One guy's in England and one guy's in America. That may be one of my 2023 goals. I can't believe I'm even saying that. I'll have to let you know if I do it. Yeah, have a great week. Write to me. Looking forward to a great year ahead. Thanks.